what if the Russians violate this truce, if the Ukrainians agree to it to avoid this propaganda loss, and then they just say, gotcha, and attack? The supposed ceasefire in Ukraine. So currently, Ukrainians and Russians, many across the Orthodox world, are celebrating Orthodox Christmas. And you know how normal Christmas, as many Ukrainians were celebrating, and there was no ceasefire announced for, Orthodox Christmas is not on December 25th, like many people, me included. How we celebrate Christmas, many Orthodox Christians, it's around the 6th and the 7th. This is around where they celebrate quote-unquote Orthodox Christmas. Now in Ukraine, there's a divide on whether Ukrainians celebrate it on December 25th, especially since the war started and they've divided themselves more and more from Russia, or on the 6th and the 7th. The more elderly you are in Ukraine, the more likely you're going to be selling the Orthodox version of Christmas, rather the instead of the December 25th version of Christmas. A lot of families celebrate both, and they'll hold separate celebrations for both days. You get the idea. There's these two separate versions of Christmas when it comes to celebrating the holiday. And Putin announced for the world that he was going to be holding a 36-hour ceasefire for Orthodox Christians to respect Christians everywhere, respect the Orthodox community in Ukraine. That there wasn't going to be any fighting, there wasn't going to be any bombing. He announced a ceasefire, and I want to talk about that. Let's play the story.
Announced an Orthodox Christmas truce in their war in Ukraine, starting tomorrow and lasting until the end of Saturday. Joining us now by phone is NBC's Matt Bradley, who is outside of Kyiv. So, Matt, what do we know about it, and what would this mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting one, Katie, because this would be starting tomorrow at noon Ukraine time and going all the way for about 36 hours until midnight the following day, until midnight on Christmas Day in the Orthodox Church. So it's hard to see how this is going to play out, because we heard this earlier from Patriarch Kirill I. He's the patriarch, sort of the Pope, if you will, of the and,
Wait, what? Wait, what the fuck was that? Wait, this is MSNBC. Did you guys understand a single word of that? Where's this guy calling from? This is a mainstream news channel. This was broadcasted on national television. What? Let me listen to that again.
Patriarch Kirill I. He's the patriarch, sort of the Pope, if you will, of the
This is some top level commentary on MSNBC.
And I saw this and didn't really see how that was going to play out, but then we saw that Vladimir Putin himself, the leader of Russia, ordered that his defense secretary, Shoigu, implement this on the front lines where battles have been raging, particularly around the city of Bakhmut, right on the fringes of the Donbass region, where there's just been fierce fighting for the last several months. Now, we had already heard from that initial statement from Patriarch Kirill, a reaction from Kyiv, from the advisor to the president, Mikhail Podolyak, and he called this a cynical trap and an element of propaganda. But this puts Kyiv in a really interesting and kind of a tough position. Do they abide by this truce and risk that they could get a surprise attack from the Russians during this truce, which is going to last for a whopping 36 hours? That's an eternity on this battlefield. Or do they risk firing back and taking advantage of the situation when the guns are silent on the Russian side and really falling into what as they would rightfully call a propaganda trap? Obviously, the Kremlin would love to be able to say they silenced their guns and the Ukrainians disobeyed.
So, okay, so this is the dilemma that many people were like viewing this conflict from a distance was, well, this puts the Ukrainians in a difficult position, because let's say they don't trust the Russians and they continue to fight. They continue to fight as if nothing changed. Then the Russians can say, haha, you fools. I can't believe you would engage in such horrific behavior. And then they've got a propaganda victory. But if they try to respect this truce and then the Russians say, screw you, I don't care. And then they, violate the truce, as they have done in the past. They have lied in the past. They said they weren't going to invade in the first place. They said that it was all just military drills before they, launched multiple false flag invasions. from the Ukrainian side into the Russian side, saying, oh, the Ukrainians just invaded us, even though they were just, you know, the evidence they presented, which is footage from occupied territory of their soldiers dressed up like Ukrainian soldiers, invading them, just a clear false flag. Then they invaded the country. So the Russians have showed themselves to be dishonest when it comes to this. So this is the question that everybody viewed this from was, well, what if the Russians violate this truce, if the Ukrainians agree to it to avoid this propaganda loss, and then they just say, gotcha, and attack? I mean, the Russians don't have anything to lose if they really do that. Oh, what are they going to lose? International standing? Are people not going to respect the Russians? Are people not going to give them a big thumbs up? Are people going to start turning against them and saying, oh, this invasion's bad? No, everybody has already turned against them. They lose every single UN vote on this issue. They are condemned by the vast majority of nations. They're sanctioned by tons of countries. There's no way for it to get worse for them. And so that's the difficult position the Ukrainian government's in. But Zelensky responded to this claim, and he brings up something that was also a major concern of me, which is not necessarily that the Russians would violate this, which they could violate it and use this as a trick and you know, attack the Ukrainians on Orthodox Christmas. Also, it's notable that the same was not offered for December 25th, by the way. It's not only that they could do that, but there's also a concern that they just use this time to rearm their soldiers, regroup, move in tanks and armored heavy vehicles. So they could stop firing, but then use all of this time to rearm, regroup, fix their logistical problems, and attack. Once the ceasefire is over, they can be regrouped and ready to launch new offensives. Definitely, since they've been grinding themselves down on Bakhmut for days, not days on end, not weeks on end, months on end now. Months. It's time that can be useful for them. There's a reason why there's been a few other requests for ceasefire as well. Not because, oh, this ceasefire is going to lead to an end of the conflict, but because these ceasefires can allow the Russians to remove the pressure that the Ukrainians have placed upon them and give themselves time to regroup to then, like, redouble their efforts later. And that's the concern that Zelensky brought up in response to the story when he spoke to the Ukrainian people about this proposed ceasefire. Let's listen to what Zelensky had to say. As of today, you have already lost almost 110,000. He's talking to, like, the people of Russia in this. Well, 110,000 of your soldiers killed in this war. Those who continued the terror against our country and sent all those people of yours to the slaughter, rejecting our offers to stop the Russian aggression, certainly do not value life and definitely do not seek peace. Now they want to use Christmas as a cover to at least briefly stop the advance of our guys in Donbass and bring equipment, ammunition, and mobilized men closer to our positions. What will this bring? Just another increase in the death toll. Everyone in the world knows that the Kremlin uses respites at war to continue the war with renewed vigor. But to end the war faster, that is not what is needed at all. What is needed is the citizens of Russia who will find the courage to free themselves of their shameful fear of one man in the Kremlin, at least for 36 hours, at least at Christmas time. Your fear of him destroys your country, which is already deep, but not in a bunker. To end the war is to end your state's aggression. Even when your missiles and drones are not hitting our cities, the terror in the occupied territories continues. You don't give Ukrainians any respite. People are tortured, electrocuted, and raped. This continues every day while your soldiers are on our soil. And the war will be over when your soldiers either leave or we drive them out. So let them take their toilet bowls. They'll need them on the road. Go back home. Behind our borders of 1991. For those of you curious why he's saying let them take the toilet bowls, there's been a lot of photographs and video from Ukraine of Russian soldiers looting toilet bowls, microwaves, washing machines, and stuff from homes as they retreat. I thank everyone who helped our people defend freedom.
Захищати свободу. Дякую всім, хто воює і працює заради того, щоб терористи зазнали поразки. Слава нашому
Glory to our
міцному
strong
народу.
people.
Слава Україні.
Slava Ukraine, glory to Ukraine, Yodam Slav, yada yada. Anyway, the general tenor of this speech in reaction to this proposed ceasefire is, number one, we can't trust the Russians. Look at their track record, which, considering just the last 8 years, understandable. And two, all the Russians will do with this time is to redouble their efforts on Bakhmut, which have been failing miserably. The Russians were confident that they were going to take Bakhmut, and they told the world they were going to take Bakhmut, and the Wagner group was leading the way as they were bragging that the city would fall. And every other day, and I know that this is how Russian state media was talking about it, not only because I saw Russian state media talk about it in this way, but I saw the people who watch Russian state media and believe Russian state media come into my Twitch chat, come into my, on very few occasions, but come into the always based, always number one, always top cack, DylanBurns.TV chat, my site chat as well, and even spread some of these messages of Bakhmut will fall, Bakhmut's fall is inevitable. And I had that for like 2 months. The last 2 months, I had that every other day. We'd have somebody pop in and say, oh, Dylan, you Ukrainian libcuck, libtard, you are foolish for thinking that the Donbass could hold against the glory of the Russian Empire. And some like variation of that simpage over Russia and Vladimir Putin. And every time I would give the same response, like, hey, Bakhmut has yet to fall yet. Bakhmut has yet to fall. The people I know there are pretty fierce. I think they've got a good shot. And as we have seen, they did have a good shot, and they've stopped the Russian advance. And they cannot capture Kramatorsk, which they want. They cannot capture the rest of the Donbass, which has been a war goal since the start. Well, it wasn't the war goal since the start, but they've compromised to make that the new war goal after they failed the regime change war in Ukraine. Now they're trying to scrape out this idea of Novorossiya, and the Donbass is important to that. Because they've been saying for this entirety of the war that, hey, this is the thing we've been fighting over the last 8 years. It's time to liberate it. And they can't unless they capture Bakhmut, a city of about, what, 10,000 to 15,000 people? Now it's like 5,000 max. It's probably more, like down to like 1 to 2K people in the city. If that. Hopefully they get the rest of them out of there. But this shows that Russia's ability to make Ukraine submit if they can't capture a city of 10,000 people. And there's still some in Russian state media who pretend they can capture Kiev. I mean, it's pathetic, and they can't do it. And so they need a ceasefire to redouble their efforts with new vigor as they try to attack Bakhmut again. So I think it was smart, personally, for Zelensky to not accept this. He is thinking long term. He's not thinking about short term PR like, oh, look at this Christmas truce stuff. He's thinking long term, what's the quickest way to bring an end to this conflict? And is not allowing the Russians to redouble their efforts, resupply themselves to try to capture Bakhmut as they have. By the way, whether or not you thought it was a good idea, put to the side or not, the Russians did not uphold this proposed truce. They broke it. To be quite frank, they broke it almost immediately. We're still in like the starting stages, quote unquote, of the Russian truce, and they've already broken it. They've already bombed Ukrainian military positions, and they've already killed Ukrainian civilians in their bombardment. Whether or not you think they would have done this if the Ukrainians accepted this truce proposal or not, I don't know. Putin said that they were going to be doing this truce. They didn't say they were only going to do this truce if the Ukrainians agreed or if the Ukrainians didn't agree. They said they were going to do this truce, and they didn't respect the truce for even 24 hours, let alone the 36 originally that they proposed, that they said they were going to. So I understand the desire for us to have a Christmas truce, but if that Christmas truce is not a Christmas truce, but just a cynical tool to redouble the war effort, then it's not really in the spirit of Christmas to respect lies and deceit and the rearming of soldiers that will then be used to ram against your nation's cities. I don't think Santa Claus would put Vladimir Putin on the nice list for this behavior, to say the least.